Despite constantly changing health advice, the cafe had briefly reopened for dine-in, but just days ago, the family decided to return to takeaway only.
So many people, they were saying they're so happy to come back to a cafe, have that environment, but we are sad now we again had to go back.
For these businesses and others like them, the next 4 weeks will be a test. Not everyone will make it.
It would take a few weeks up to several months for business operators to regain their confidence.
Businesses in neighbouring suburbs are watching on with trepidation.
People are scared to come to the shop, and basically they prefer more to sell via Uber.
Atul Sharma's already had to cancel stock orders and stand down staff.
In the hotspots of Melbourne, there's not a business that we've spoken to that hasn't felt the impact of COVID-19. Now, with the lockdowns, everyone's hoping that things get back to normal as quickly as possible.
That makes business as usual anything but. Nasim Kadem, ABC News, Melbourne.
Any Victorians from those 10 hotspot postcodes could face an $11,000 fine or even jail time if they travel to New South Wales. And the same penalties apply for returning travellers to New South Wales if they don't self-isolate after visiting any of the affected Melbourne suburbs.
Victorians from coronavirus hotspots are on notice. Crossing the border could land you in jail.
As soon as you step foot in New South Wales, you'll be exposed to the possibility of 6 months jail and an $11,000 fine.
I don't expect anybody to be able to actually get out of those hotspots in the first place, but if they do happen to make their way into New South Wales, there will be heavy penalties.
Fortunately, I don't live in one of those hotspots, so, but yes, it is a concern for sure.
Luckily, our suburb wasn't in lockdown. We were off by just one number, so we were allowed to make it.
I feel like it's necessary in order to kill whatever this is. It needs to be shut down, and we need to be very serious about what we're doing.
There'll be no postcode checks at the airport or along the border. Police will instead be on the lookout for Victorian number plates. New South Wales residents who've been in the hotspots in the past 14 days will have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. 14 new infections have been identified in New South Wales, all in returned travellers at quarantine hotels. The absence of community transmission means more restrictions can be relaxed. Cinemas and theatres can now reopen, so too can entertainment centres like casinos and strip clubs. Community sport can restart competition, and up to 10,000 spectators will be allowed inside stadiums. Public transport capacity is also doubling to allow 23 people on a bus, 68 on a train, 450 on a ferry and 65 on a tram. The 1 person per 4 square metre rule remains in place. For New South Wales, it's among the last remaining restrictions, serving as a reminder the pandemic isn't over. Lily Mayers, ABC News, Sydney.
The outlook for Australia's security is being drastically downgraded in a bleak new stocktake of military needs and threats. Scott Morrison is ordering tens of billions of dollars worth of weaponry to sharpen the Defence Force's teeth in a world he predicts will become poorer and more dangerous. The biggest threat is posed by China, and the Prime Minister is even comparing this build-up of pressure to the final years of the 1930s and the descent into World War II. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn at Parliament House.
Mighty tough, able to withstand attack.
Welcome to the boxer.
Scott Morrison's upping Australia's defences while commanding the armed forces to be more assertive, albeit in increasingly uncertain times.
The risk of miscalculation and even conflict is heightening.
Shape, deter, respond is the new catchphrase, a reshaping of priorities pummeled by a pandemic.
A post-COVID world that is poorer, that is more dangerous and that is more disorderly.
A 10-year, $270 billion defence spend, giving the ADF more potent strike capacity over longer distances, at sea, in the air and on land, along with a greater focus on new domains of cyber and space. Australia will buy long-range anti-ship missiles from the US, with billions to be spent developing hypersonic weapons. A network of undersea surveillance sensors underscoring a new emphasis on Australia's own backyard.
The Indo-Pacific is the epicentre of rising strategic competition.
The reason? China. Beijing's expansionism in the South China Sea, its nationalistic assertiveness under Xi Jinping. But in the midst of the COVID-induced world recession, the Prime Minister sees a historic comparison.
When the global and regional order collapsed in the 1930s and 1940s. That is a sobering thought.
The person who raises Nazis loses the debate. I think that quite often that is the case.
If you look at the behaviour of China, annexing territories, suppressing minorities, you know, there's an echo of history that we can't ignore.
Beijing will more than bristle at the comparison between China's rise and fascist Germany. It won't have missed Scott Morrison's alignment of his regional diplomatic focus and the defence effort. The PM's Pacific step-up now comes with military backup. So if our part of the world is the epicentre of a strategic wrestle between China and the United States, Australia will be in the thick of it. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The institutions that have refused to sign up to the